Okay, we are checking to see who we have here. Checking to see who we have here. Yeah, we have, I know there's a couple people who won't be able to join us today. One member is ill. I know there's a couple people who won't be able to join us today. Oh, great. One member is ill. Nick, are you hearing a record?
Yes, and I've removed that, so you should be good to go.
Thank you very much. I'll just point out that Nick Fazio is our technical expert. Thank you very much. And we will put his phone number and email address on screen here shortly, but you also had it in your email.
Absolutely. If you need anything, just let me know.
But do you take care of absolutely everything, including all of my IT glitches at home?
Nope, just Zoom.
Okay, you make household?
If I took care of absolutely everything, I would never sleep.
Of course.
Yeah. Well, it's 3:31, and I think we're going to go ahead and get started. We are going to start this meeting off with Lucinda giving a welcome. Lucinda, I'm going to turn it over to you. Oh, you're on mute.
I'm off now. Good afternoon again. Thank you. It's been since December, so Happy New Year, everyone. Want to thank you for participating in our Equity and Mobility Advisory Committee for the I-5 and I-205 projects. And, you know, we appreciate your time and your commitment to this process. As we shared, you know, I think I called a lot of you and talked to you after I had received Christine's resignation. And, you know, it's kind of like Christine was a bedrock. She helped shepherd the committee to where we are today. She is like big shoes to fill for sure. She was thoughtful. I love the way that she would always start us off with not only her land acknowledgements, but the centering exercises, which I'm sure Anne might continue today. But all just to get us in the room and get us all together and on one accord. So, you know, thank her. We thanked her. We were grateful for her time with us. And we know the committee has a lot of work to do. We talked about at the beginning, you know, this is new. Tolls are new to Oregon. You guys are critical to what we do to keep our eye on equity and, you know, keep focused on what's affecting people and not just a process of putting in tolls. So we are still looking for a facilitator. I know I reached out. I asked some committee members if they could give me recommendations. We found some other folks to give us recommendations, and we are prioritizing looking for a facilitator. And I want to make sure that that same kind of authenticity that Christine brought and the focus on equity, we find somebody who can actually fill those shoes, and those are big, broad shoes to fill. We're hoping to have somebody by your next meeting. But for today, we have Anne Presenton, and I think you've met her before. She's been part of the toll team, and she's going to facilitate the discussion today. And I want to thank you for stepping into this role.
Thank you, and happy to be here. And as Lucinda said, I do have some big shoes to fill. So I'm going to ask you in advance for some flexibility and some grace. In my temporary role, I am using Christine's solid foundation for our committee processes. And I've also asked a few people to help with the facilitator duties. So I'm already going to reach out and thank Amanda and Fabian, who will be helping me, and also Chris Lepe from the project team, who will be helping out as well. So I think from here, Josh, you can put up the PowerPoint. Okay, there we go. We are recording the entire meeting. And as I said, Nick is your technical helper. If you're having any trouble, please feel free to reach out, note his phone number and email just in case you need it. What you say is part of the public record, and we will make the recording available a little bit later on our website. At any time, we do wish to hear from members of the public. You can go to Oregon Tolling at odot.state.or.us and send us an email, or you can get more information about the project at oregontolling.org. Okay, next slide. It's back to Lucinda. Yeah, go
Can I
ahead.
jump back in? Sure.
Yes, please.
So we've added 2 new members to the team. Maria Ellis, she's our Economic Equity Manager, and she's with the Social Equity Office of ODOT in Salem, but she's also, I'll call her a liaison and very critical piece here to the Urban Mobility Office. And then also we have, it's kind of funny because it's like, I flipped them. So we have our new toll policy manager, and I think, how long have Garrett's been here? Maybe 90 days now. So he joined the toll team. He's the toll policy manager, and he'll take a forward role here for the EMAC. Garrett?
You want to do a few self-introductions? Say hello.
Yeah, sure. Maria, I'll defer to you. Do you want to take first?
Let me get myself off mute. Yes, I'm happy to be here, Maria Ellis. This is a new role. My first full day was on December 20th, so I still getting my feet under me. And the role of social equity manager is, like Lucinda said, is both in the Office of Social Equity and in the Urban Mobility Office, and is really meant to provide some additional kind of thinking around how we can deliver equitable economic development opportunities as part of these projects. And in terms of, that's kind of the boring, no, it's not boring stuff, I think it's great, but more personal stuff, I would share that I am from Medellin, Colombia. I always carry it in my heart. Immigrated here as a child to California, and on days when I feel kind of the tug of home, I will embarrassingly stream really bad TV from Colombia just so that I could see the city and see Medellin, and which is what I was doing last night and cracking my husband up.
Awesome.
Welcome, Maria.
Thank you.
And my name's Garrett Pryor. You'll hear a little bit more about my role when I talk in some of the presentation later, but quick background, I was a high school history teacher that turned urban planner about a decade ago, and really that the line between kind of equitable urban planning and the community organizing and advocacy world is really where I've lived this past decade. In Richmond, Virginia, I helped start up a nonprofit that was dealing with some of the collapsing schools and segregation and racial division. And now that I live in Wilsonville, I have a nonprofit that I'm helping work on issues of racial justice and inclusivity there. And just a little personal note about myself. In 1984, Akron General Hospital gave birth to 2 kids who had a love of basketball. I missed the fate bug. LeBron James was the other one. And so I was that close, just a few months away of being selected as the greatest basketball player of all time. So close. So I'm here. And LeBron could have been at the meeting if reversed. So
Thanks to you both, and welcome. We love having you all the team. I'm now going to turn this over to Amanda. Amanda.
Hi, can everyone hear me? Great. I'm Amanda Garcia Snell. I'm with Washington County, and I will be leading us in the centering exercise. So I'll just go ahead and invite you to close your eyes or gaze softly downward. And feel your chair under your legs. Breathe in deeply through your nose and out your mouth. And feel your hands in your lap. And breathe in deeply through your nose and out your mouth. And feel your feet on the ground. Breathe in deeply through your nose and out your mouth. And slowly open your eyes and breathe normally. Thank you.
Thank you so much for bringing us to present. Josh, can you have us all in full group for a moment? Thanks. This is the time that we would, in our past meetings, have done a land acknowledgement. And I was working with Eduardo, who was agreeing to help us with that. And I want to thank him for his willingness. ODOT is working really hard to make sure that we can do a land acknowledgement in a virtual environment and be both respectful and authentic. We've had some discussions, or the collective we, not me personally, but ODOT has had some discussions with tribal governments and found that more conversation is needed. So we hope to bring back our land acknowledgement after some additional conversations with our tribal leaders. If you have any experience with this, of land acknowledgements in a virtual environment, or advice to ODOT in this area, I'd ask you to please reach out to one of the members of the project team. Okay, I think we can move on. Thank you. We're now moving on to our meeting goals and purpose. Today, we're always listening and learning through reflection and discussion, and we want to hear your insights. And the focus for today is discussing and revising our process equity performance measures, and then introducing the equity and mobility strategies that is part of your charge from the commission, and which are reflected in the equity framework that you adopted at your last meeting. We're also going to offer some feedback to Metro in their regional congestion pricing study. Next slide. Before we get into the meat of everything, we're going to just remind everybody of the working agreements, and I've asked Fabian to help us with that. Fabian?
Yes. Hi, everyone. Fabian here. And I don't have Christine's voice, so I'm definitely going to miss that. But our working together agreement entailed listen, believe, and reflect. Accept non-closure for the moment. Speak your own truth with compassion. Listen to understand. Don't listen to respond. Value and celebrate each other's experiences. Open hearts plus open minds. Explorations of possibilities. Make space, then take space. Be concise. Bring your best thinking into the room, as well as remember to attack the problem and not the person. And there's always going to be disagreement, frustration, and differences, but it's important to acknowledge them and explore and address them as well.
Thank you very much. Can we all agree to those? Okay, we just have a little quick reminder of the agenda. We're in the welcome, and number one, we're going to move on to public comment and committee report out. Then we're going to do a toll program update, and Garrett will be giving that. We'll then move on to reflecting on what we did last time with our process equity performance measures. We'll take a little break, get into a workshop, and then move on to outcome equity and equity and mobility strategies. And an example of that will be what we're going to hear from Metro. And we're going to do one new thing today, which is an evaluation. And so we're going to try and stop the meeting 5 minutes in advance. You will receive during the course of this meeting an email from Nick that has a link to an evaluation survey. So it's just one way we're trying to model process equity and get some feedback from you on how we are doing. Next slide. Okay, we want to hear from you on what you're hearing from your communities, and I've asked Dwight to share a little bit about what he's hearing in his community. Dwight. You're on mute.
All right, I went to
Yeah.
click on it and something else came up on the screen. I clicked on it. I'm not sure where it went, but anyway, I appreciate the opportunity to share a little bit with the committee today. I must preface my comments by with the disclaimer that, you know, I work for the city of Wilsonville and I'm the transit director for SMART, and the city of Wilsonville hasn't taken an official position on tolling. And so my comments are just based on being a committee member and spending time with folks in my network and getting, you know, their reaction to it. That said, I have not spoken to anyone yet, and I'm sure it will happen, that is in support of tolling. And I think our letters and emails that we've received, at least since I've been on the committee, kind of reflect that as much. So that being said, I'm hearing that there is a consensus, at least a consensus, for supporting increased funding for transportation and transit projects overall. So there is that desire to see transportation and transit projects funded. I'm also hearing that there is a desire to see increased investment in alternative modes of transportation, anything other than single occupancy vehicles. So there is that support for that. There is also support, which I think is probably something that we've been hearing in our discussions, just as committee members here, is that there is support for investment in parallel facilities. So any roads, bridges that run parallel to the 205, which is the target for this tolling project, would need to see increased investment. One of the things that I thought was kind of interesting, I think it probably goes along with the fact that there doesn't appear to be a whole lot of support for tolling in general, is that some people said that they're not sure that tolling can be made equitable. So, and I think that's an interesting concept. If you don't believe that tolling can be made equitable, I don't know where you go from there, other than, I guess the proof is in the pudding. So the work that we're doing, the recommendations that we make, someone's going to test them at some point and challenge whether they are truly equitable or not. So, if you don't, again, I go back to my own experience with the transit system that I run here, which is entirely free. We don't charge anybody. And so I don't think there's anything more equitable than free. So, wherever my transit system goes, between here in Salem, between here in Canby, between here and Tualatin, it's all at no cost to the user. So regardless of your social economic background, the fare is the same. So, whether we could do something like that, or our recommendation would lead us to something like that, we'll see. So, that's kind of the long and short of what I'm hearing here in, I should say, with my network of folks that I spend time with. So.
Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah. Do we have another person who would like to share the results of a conversation they've had recently about tolling in their networks? Okay. So before the next meeting, Kari.
Hi, thanks for the opportunity. I just wanted to thank Dwight for the comments. I think that's a lot of what I've been hearing as well. I think especially the second half of that piece. I have actually heard people who are supportive of tolling. So I guarantee that may come your way at some point, but I'm hearing a lot of folks with a lot of questions, wondering how we can really make this an equitable system, needing to think about the revenue impacts of tolling, and really, I want to say concern about how this process will intentionally prioritize community first, how we will, through this process, be leading with equity and starting with mitigation, and really, I think, looking at how we're going to sort of flip the usual way of doing this work so that the needs that we know and hear about are coming first and are being addressed first. And I think I'll have more comments later when we hear more about sort of where things are progressing. But this has been something that's come up a lot in the community conversations that I've been having, is, you know, just exactly what the process and the impact is going to be in terms of making this an equitable system.
Thank you very much, Kari. That's very helpful. We did receive some public comments, about 10. They were sent to you from Hannah on Monday, that were directed to this body. Would anyone like to discuss any of the comments that were forwarded to you? And for members of the public, these will be attached to the meeting summary. Any thoughts to reflect?
Yeah, I was going over some of those comments and noticing there's some themes, obviously, like opposing tolling and overall, but then also just concerns about verbatim is alternate route driving due to congestion, so diversion, mass transit's not an option because the system doesn't provide an efficient way to get around, and then just impact on lower-income communities. So a lot of diversion and not having transportation options to alleviate some of that. So these are some things I just noticed as themes throughout those comments.
Thanks, Izzy. Okay, we're going to move on to public comment. And there's a team of folks who are working in the background. Do we have any members who have expressed their desire to do public comment? If you do want to provide verbal comment to the committee, now is the time. You would have up to 2 minutes to speak, depending on the number of people. We'll need you to raise your virtual hand, or if you're on a phone, please use *9 to indicate that you would like to make comment.
And we do have one raised hand from Paul Edgar. So Nick is going to allow Paul to speak, and I'm going to set a timer for us.
Okay, thank you very much, Josh.
Hello, I hope you can see me. If you can't, I'm here in Oregon City. The issue is, if we toll at the Abernathy Bridge, the key problem that will happen is that the diversion to the old Oregon City Bridge will strangle downtown Oregon City and Highway 99E McLaughlin Boulevard. 90% of the traffic coming across the old bridge from Westland side will turn to Main Street. Onto Main Street, they will go to Highway 99, and the key lights there will stop all of the traffic. And this is a strategic urban freight route. This will clog up downtown Oregon City and will effectively create a nightmare. It will turn McLaughlin Boulevard, Highway 99E into a main arterial. It will also do the same thing to Highway 43. The negative impacts are just there, and there's virtually nothing that you could do about it. The casual number of trips that people take back and forth across the Willamette River using the Abernathy Bridge is unbelievable. And to have that being the two only bridges from going south, it's just a catastrophic effect, and there's nothing that could be done. It will just bring Oregon City to its knees. It'll bring a lot of West Lynn to its knees. It will destroy all of our opportunities to advance business, even the legacy, the Willamette Falls Legacy Project. This will kill it. Sorry to say, but something else has to be done.
Thank you so much, Paul. That's very helpful and a good reminder about the Willamette Falls Legacy Project. Josh, do you have any other folks who have raised their hand?
That's the only one I see, Ann.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, again, we always welcome comments. If we get written comments, they're to the committee, they are provided to the committee, and they're also included in the meeting summary. At this time, we're going to bring back the slide presentation. Okay. We are going to do a toll program update. It's actually going to be Garrett, I believe, who's giving the presentation, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, Garrett, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you, Ann. So I would say the purpose of this update are two things. One is to really at ODOT to be honest and transparent and freely share information when we know it. Although we know it may not provide the complete answer, we'd really like to get this information to you as it's coming to us. And then secondly, what gets presented to you all, we want to make sure that's consistently, you're hearing what other people are hearing as well. So it's not different messages for different audiences. So a few of these slides are kind of the deck that we've been bringing to some of our meetings at the Region 1 Act and other places. Next slide, please. So one of these big questions that keeps coming up and we're going to have to answer, and it's going to be kind of piece by piece, is how will toll revenue be spent? And so Brendan Finn was here last EMAC presentation and talked about part of that answer. And part of that answer are that tolling is going to be a part of this comprehensive congestion and management and mobility plan. Next slide. I'm providing this map here again for you to kind of take a look at that. Like, this is what ODOT so far has identified as the game plan for the region. And you see the stamp date on that. That's when it was brought before the Oregon Transportation Commission. And really, I'm providing this to show you that here are some of the highway and the bike and pedestrian projects that have been identified and kind of where tolling geographically fits compared to those. Next slide. Now, how does tolling actually connect to or fund these different projects? That's a question that we're beginning to answer. We're not fully there yet. But I want us to focus in on the purple bar that's in the middle of the screen. And that's when tolling would begin and revenue would start coming in. And as you can see, the purple bar, if you look up and down, very much aligns with orange, and orange means construction. And so for a lot of these projects, that having tolling revenue coming in can be used to take it that last mile or take it that last piece of it. Next slide. So the other piece of information, and again, we're providing this again that Brendan shared, was this pivot in the project. And a lot of that is based on this feedback we got about fairness and diversion, equity, climate, and congestion management. And so if we could go to the next slide. So where the project is sort of shifting or pivoting is if you look on where it says current toll corridor, and there's the white and the purple hashing on Interstate 5. When the EMAC was first set up, this is what you all were going to look at, and we as the project team were going to look at on I-5. It was going to be somewhere in that hashed area. Now, based on those comments that we've been receiving these last 6-7 months, that study footprint for I-5 is now going to extend to the dark purple areas that you see on the screen. So it includes that hashed area, including the purple on I-5, and then the purple segments of I-205 that would go along with our 205 project to really comprise what at the current time we're calling is system-wide tolling. Next slide. So what's happening to the 205 project? That's still going forward. Here are some of the key kind of milestone dates as that project progresses. And I'll talk in a second about how the EMAC is going to play a role in that process. Next slide. And so one of the big questions out there was how exactly is the tolling on 205 going to connect to the construction? And we just want to be clear with the statement you see there on the screen that to get the safer and less congested 205, to get the seismic updates to the bridges and the third lane in each direction, tolling is needed to complete that project. It's a part of a kind of a funding package that'll deliver that. And so the concerns we continue to hear about, and we've been hearing about for years now, I think you're going to see in a second that's where the real teeth of this group, that's where we're really going to camp out spending the next year, are coming up with actual boots on the ground strategies or investments. And so we'll be working with some technical committees of the different agencies, and we're going to bring that information to you all. And kind of how that would get delivered. It might not be ODOT, maybe other agencies would deliver that needed transit or bike lane or other type of program. Next slide. And so honestly, one of my major roles on the project is to work with you all within this next year on the outcome equity side. So really our next EMAC meeting, we're going to spend camping out and figuring out a game plan on how we're going to accomplish the bullet points that are here on the screen. So with the I-205 project, you all will see the alternatives and the performance measures of how we're measuring outcome equity. We're going to look at a mitigation. So, at the very neighborhood level or what's going on there, but then also for the toll program itself, this kind of larger scale, what are some more structural or programmatic things that we can get in place that will address the issues of equity that we've talked about, and then you will have an ending point where and I think it'd be really important for you all as EMAC members, some of you, to come and present to the OTC directly what your findings are, what your feedback is for the work there on 205, but then the tolling program as it heads forward into those longer corridor studies or beyond. So with that, that's the end of my presentation. I think we have some time here for discussion. So if you have any questions or comments.
Sure. James.
Thanks. I think that's really great information. Can you tell me your pronunciation of your name again, please?
Yeah, Garrett Pryor.
Garrett. All right, sorry. I didn't want to jack it up. Garrett, you said that one of the key pieces of the funding for the 205 projects was tolling, so that those have been the revenue from tolling is going to offset the cost of the construction, as I understand it. And if that is the case, that would mean that there is some level of forecasting on revenue from the tolling. And my question would be, if the revenue from the tolling doesn't meet expectations, doesn't meet the forecast, and if we come up, let's say down the road, with kind of a model of a percentage of the funding goes to the state to cover costs that you've described, as well as some of the funding's going to go to the community, and broad terms community, whatever that means, as a balance. What's in place so that if the funding doesn't come through as anticipated, all the money doesn't go to the state and the other money doesn't end up going to the community?
Sure. And that's a great question. Lucinda, I'm going to kick that to you because you've managed tolling systems before. So
I knew it. I was like, oh, you're kicking that ball, huh?
No, it's a good one though. Yeah.
James, it's a great question. And what I want to say is that the Transportation Commission in September had a policy that says net toll revenue stays in the corridor. So we have to pay our bills first. So it's not like you're going to have that choice between, do I pay a bill and give half to community? What we're saying is, after all the bills are paid, what was left stays on that net toll revenue stays on the corridor. So it's not and no, we don't know what the revenue looks like now. We don't even have those projections. What we're believing is that we could bond against toll revenue when it starts. But it, that's further out than now. So.
Oh, I see. So if you bonded and you said, hey, here's our forecast, and whoever the bonding funding source would say, all right, we're going to loan to say 60% of your forecast, and that 60% is paid, and that net is the community piece. The only thing that I worry about is if we, crystal ball here, if we were in place and we would have gone through this COVID situation where traffic volumes are down significantly, then that would mean that there would be no money that's going into the community programs or the programs supported by tolling resources. And if you start saying, oh, we go to these smaller community agencies and we pull that funding, I don't know where that safety net is. That would be my concern. And I understand that we're talking way off in the future, but everybody wants to talk about the money. That's why I'm bringing this up.
Mm-hmm. So let me I want to clarify one thing. The corridor, the definition of how the money gets separated has all not been discussed. So that's something else that's a conversation that has to happen between all the partners. So that way we have the corridor, and then how do you have access, or how do you gain access to the money? Because at this point it's a pot of money, not with anyone's name on it. So they'd have to have some parameters for that too, or some process. So great question. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think that's some of the things that Garrett's starting to think about that this committee could actually start to delve into as well. I see Carrie, Abe, and Michael in that order, or Kari, excuse me, Kari.
Thank you. Thanks, Garrett, for the presentation. I have a couple of questions. One of them is, so the map that you presented has some more specificity around certain transit or bike ped projects that are being looked at. I don't reflect it in the chart that followed the map. And I guess, and maybe want to clarify with Lucinda's comment just now that the OTC has already made a decision on what would come first in terms of being paid for, especially since I'm not seeing that recognized in this chart that outlines costs and what would be being put forward and what would be paid for first. I think, reflecting James's comment as well, and I think some of what I've seen around projects that are committed or bonded, there's no guarantee that there's going to be any money left over for these things. And if they're undefined, then I think any of the work that we're doing in this committee is going to be for naught, because it doesn't appear that it's being reflected here at all. And some decisions are already being made by the OTC.
So all the bike ped, the other multimodal that was on the map are other projects that are in the area already being done. So they're not connected to what we're doing in tolls. Those are maybe connected to other projects done by other people. We just wanted to make sure that you could see the whole thing, that it was mobility. We weren't just talking about tolls and roads. So those projects are already being done. The one you see on, I think we have a circle. I'm thinking of the map on the I-205, you see a circle for a bike ped bridge. That is a study that's being done, and it looks like it's right on the Abernathy, but that's actually that, yes, Willamette River bike ped crossing study. That study is being done now. So it's not like these projects, all the other projects are already defined. So it's not, those are not part of this. They are projects that are already either done or being studied.
Thank you
Sure.
for that clarification. I guess then my follow-up question is, or comment is that still in this chart, I don't see a line item or a bucket to indicate where there would be funding for the sort of mitigation that we've been talking about. And I think especially seeing that some of these projects, they're being constructed and they're being built well before the tolling goes into place. I think that if I can sort of summarize some of the flavor of the comments that I've heard from this committee is that there's a really strong desire to see mitigation in place also before the tolling happens. And, we will talk more about that, but not seeing it reflected in this chart gives me a lot of concern that it's not only going to come well after the tolling goes into place, but that it, may not actually show up at all, given these other things that have been committed to, and that there is not a commitment to doing the mitigation as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Kari.
Can I just, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Lucinda. Then we have Abe and Michael who have questions too.
Well, real quick, I just want to just kind of finish off Kari's comment regarding mitigation. So mitigation is part of the toll program. So before we put in the toll, we'll have whatever the mitigation is will be part of what we deliver for the implementation of tolls. At this point, we don't know what it is, but we have that as part of the implementation cost. Did we have that? Did we have that implementation cost sheet? It's, well, for the toll program, it's $300 or $400 million. And part of that has mitigation in it for whatever it is that is determined to be, that needs to be mitigated. We do not know exactly what that is right now, but there is money for it. So tolls won't happen without the mitigation happening too. Thanks, Kari.
Abe.
Yeah, I think most of my question was actually answered with Kari's question, where I was curious, just seeing this 2-slide sequence of slide 12 that says tolling is a vital funding element for projects in the management mobility plan, and then seeing that slide, I was curious what equity criteria were applied to the development of that map and those projects and prioritization and criteria. But hearing that these are kind of just a landscape snapshot of what's already in effect helps me understand and clear that up. So thanks.
Thank you, Abe. Michael.
Hi, everyone. Good to see you all. And my question is along the lines as well of what Kari was asking. And I'm especially interested in this because I heard last week about proposed state legislation that ties toll revenue exclusively to tollway projects. And from the discussions at the City of Portland that they've been having about, how to make tolling equitable, it has become clear that the use of toll revenue is a really critical component in creating an equitable toll program. And that's something we've talked about here in this space as well. And that a significant amount of the revenue must be used for things like a multimodal system, system improvements, and, to provide people with other options as the price of driving rises. So are the investments that you are proposing here or on slide 14, are those final, or will this committee have a chance to influence the revenue discussion?
So are we talking about the slide? I'm sorry, is it the slide with the bars?
Yes.
Is that is it the slide with the bars?
Right. And
so those are all current projects. You have the Rose Quarter, IBR, Interstate Bridge. Those are all going projects. All of those projects, I-205 project, all of those projects are going.
So I guess that I want to echo that concern that, Kari was pointing out, that we're not really seeing like the multimodal projects, accounted for on here. I guess I'm sort of just having that feeling that, all toll revenues will, go towards paying these bonds. And then I guess, I'm not really sure what we're really left with. And, are we left with any kind of meaningful amount? And I know that it's still hard to calculate, but I think having that, listed here would make it clear that is a priority.
So the multimodal, can we go back to the map? I'm sorry. Now we're jumping all through this slide deck right now. Sorry about that.
We do have some time, so I think we're good. So,
okay.
So let's get this question answered. We're
we
good.
can talk. So all the projects that you see here that are multimodal projects, are projects that are being done by either others or ODOT that are already being done. These are not part of that other group of things that need to be paid for that are being done. These things are being done. Okay, so these things you can look at and say, okay, this is what's going on. It's kind of like trying to show you what's going on in the region, right? Not it's just a toll road. There are other things going on. What happens on the toll road, the mitigation that we need to do, are things that you guys are going to tell us about. Because at this point, we don't know what those are, but they would be included here. Once we identify them, we can include them here. Does that help?
Yeah, that helps. Okay. I guess I'm, eager to see them reflected, or
I don't know what they are yet.
Yeah.
I can't. I mean, we could stick something on there, but I'm not sure what it would be right now.
So what I'm hearing here is, some requests from the committee for a little more clarity. And one, as we think about process equity performance measures, communication and clarity, that would be part of that. So it's a good thing to kind of think about as we're moving ahead.
And I would just add, I think, because I'm tracking where Michael and Kari are coming from here, as far as like, well, in transportation planning and funding, you get your project on the map, it gets studied, and then you get one of those nice implementation charts where it shows the orange to construction. And you're looking at, well, for the bike and ped projects that are here, that a few of them are in the study phase, where's the orange bar for construction? And so I think what we'll see is we'll get a look at it through the NEPA process on 205 with this committee. We'll look at more discreetly in that area, what are some projects that can be included in the federal document, in that federal study. And then we'll and you've had Travis Brower talk about this before, but we'll see, okay, well, what are the constitutional restrictions on toll revenue? And then what is other ODOT money or other money from other agencies that we can use to get orange bars on those projects, to get those projects delivered. And that's where I'm hoping to, in our next meeting, to go through more on a work plan. And so you all know that, like, at this meeting in August, we will get to this exact topic about transit and multimodal. Or at this meeting in September, we'll get to this specific commitment to low income and environmental justice community impact. So know that, like, we're going to come and make some commitments to dates for when those conversations are going to be had, but we want to do that collaboratively with you all.
Thanks, Garrett, and thank you, Linda and Anne.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on. There's a lot to process there, and I can say, being on the toll team, it's a lot to process all the time. So yeah, there's a lot of complexity here, and thank you for bringing up all of these good questions, because this is why ODOT brought you all together. I think, Josh, could you bring the slide presentation back up? We're going to move on to process equity performance measures. And Hannah Williams and Chris Lepe from the project team are going to reflect on what we heard from you during our workshop in December, so that we can then advance those process equity performance measures. And as part of this presentation, we'll do a reminder of definitions for what process equity is, and then also outcome equity. So I'm going to turn this over to Hannah to start.
Thanks, Anne. Hi, everyone. Okay, so we are here today to kind of refine our performance measures for process equity. And in your meeting packet, there is a draft process equity performance measures. So where did those come from? So I want to talk a little bit about that. So it's a collection of things. It came, as Anne mentioned, from what we heard during our workshop with you in December. It also came from our debrief and discussions with Ping and the community engagement liaisons. It was also informed by, we had an engagement evaluation survey that we sent out. And then we also took some ideas from our current public involvement plan. And so we took that and we drafted up some evaluation criteria and performance measures for process equity. And then what we'd like to do with you today, we're going to have a discussion and hopefully get that closer to getting finalized. And when it is finalized, we will put those performance measures into our updated public involvement plan, and we'll bring that back to you in late March so you can see it. And then also those performance measures will be used in our environmental document too. Next slide, please. So here is a recap of the major themes that we heard from you in December during our workshop. And when you look at the draft performance measures, you should see them reflected. So, you know, when we dig into our discussion, if something's missing or we didn't get it right, like let's flag that. So some things that we heard, definitely we need to build trust with communities and think about how we measure that trust. When we are focusing on historically excluded and underserved communities, we need to do so not just in Oregon, but also in Southwest Washington. We have some work to do to create greater transparency. We heard loud and clear, you know, people really want to know how will toll revenue be used? We just talked about it right now. And also, how are we using the feedback that we're getting, closing that feedback loop from communities, from the input we get from our community engagement liaisons. We also heard that we are putting a lot of information out there about the toll project, but is it really being understood? So need to think about that. And we really can't underestimate simple engagement tools. So, you know, flyering, going to local businesses, spots in the community, using the radio, checking for understanding using simple tools like a thumbs up or thumbs down, smiley face or frowny face. Let's think about engaging people where they are, even though it's a virtual time of engagement right now. There are virtual spaces where people are gathering. So let's figure out where those are. And there was a lot of agreement around the community engagement liaisons are absolutely fantastic and effective, and we should use them more. Next slide, please. So a little bit of a reminder about where we are. We're in step 2. Step 1 was really thinking about the who. So we were looking at communities, underserved and excluded communities around the I-205 toll project area. And we, you know, in our discussions in meeting 3, we really heard from you that we need to be considering the needs of seniors, of youth, and really people who are living with a disability. Can I get the next slide, please? Here is an example of a map when we were talking about communities along the I-205 toll project, underserved communities. Here's an example of one of the maps that we use. And so this one is looking at people who are living with a disability, and the red dot is the Abernathy Bridge. And the colors that are around it, you might not be able to read this because I really can't, but the colors that are closest to the Abernathy Bridge and really around our project area are the higher numbers. So higher numbers of people that are living with a disability in our project area. So here is an example of the type of data that you know, we'll be using for our engagement, but will also be used in our environmental document. Next slide, please. So that's step 1, thinking about the who. That's what we've been looking at in previous meetings. And today we're really getting into step 2, continuing the conversation around evaluating equity. That's what step 2 is all about. And you know, how is our I-205 toll project, how is it going to perform with equity? So I'd like to introduce Chris Lepe. You've seen him before. He's gonna come on here next to to kind of remind us about some key terms and concepts in step 2 that'll really help us for our discussion on process equity and performance measures. Next slide, please. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Hannah. And hopefully you guys can hear me okay. Great. So, hey, everybody. Good to see you all again. I'm going to walk you through, as Hannah mentioned, the process equity continuation of the conversation from our last meeting. And before we go there, I wanted to reorient all of us in regards to the terms and definitions. So goals and objectives are the results that we wish to see, both, and we're going to be looking at both process equity as well as outcome equity eventually, right? But the focus today is on process equity. Evaluation criteria is what we use to determine if our engagement was successful. And performance measures are the quantitative and qualitative methods and data to assess progress. And we're going to be, as you probably noted, for those of you that got a chance to review the performance measures handout before the meeting, there's probably about, on average, about 3 performance measures for each of the evaluation criteria that were put forth. So if we go to the next slide on some of the basics and kind of context for these performance measures, we wanted to make sure that to the degree possible, we were putting forth performance measures that were measurable and were relatively manageable. As I think was mentioned already, we tried to tie the performance measures with things that are already out there: the public involvement plan, the equity framework, the workshop that we had in December, input from community engagement liaisons, and so on and so forth. So, and you'll notice that in the handout, we actually reference where each of these performance measures and evaluation criteria were taken from directly. We wanted to make sure that to the extent possible that these performance measures were meaningful. It's not just sort of a check the box type of exercise, but also that they were achievable if we really work hard at it. And of course, making sure that it's grounded upon this project, the toll projects. And finally, we were trying to think about how do we measure success from multiple angles. And that includes access to the information that's out there about the project, participation, level of participation, and engagement and decision-making. So what are the actions that ODOT and the project team are taking? How is that input received? What is the participation? And how are decisions made? And showing that we are following through with the input into the decision-making for the project. So if we go to the next slide, we're providing here an example for y'all based on the draft document. And so just to revisit again, goals and objectives are the results we wish to see, and evaluation criteria are what we use to determine if our engagement efforts are successful. And hopefully you will tell us in a little bit what if you thought that this example is successful, and eventually, we're going to dig, deeper into the other components of the handout. So starting with this example, with the goal, historically excluded and underserved communities view ODOT as a trustworthy and transparent partner when planning the toll system. And this goal was emerged directly from the last EMAC conversation, where trust really and transparency were key themes that came out of that conversation. And so a potential objective for this would be to regularly report how input from historically excluded and underserved communities has been incorporated into the project development. So showing how input is incorporated into the project at various different decision-making points. As far as objectives, is that a good objective? Do we perhaps need other objectives that might get towards that goal of trust building and showing transparency? And then in regards to evaluation criteria, which again is how we determine if we're successful, modifications are made to the project based on input from historically excluded and currently excluded and underserved communities. So as we move on to the next slide, to show a couple of performance measures, again, these are the methods and data to assess progress. So how do we assess whether we're making progress on building trust and being transparent? So a couple of ways might be decision makers receive and consider input from historically excluded and underserved communities before advancing the project. So along each of the project stages, making sure that the decision makers receive and consider this input before the decisions are made. Seems pretty standard, right? But then what do you do with that? How do you show that it wasn't just received and considered, but that something was actually done with it. So the project team, another one could be the project team can point to community priorities identified during outreach to historically excluded and underserved communities and demonstrate that they're being implemented in the TOL program or project. So with that, I'm going to pass it on to Anne to field any questions that you might have or clarification about this particular example.
Thanks, Chris. Any clarifying questions or making sure that we captured some of those big themes from your workshop back in December? We will have a chance here shortly to sort of dive in and get your feedback on the performance measures, but just want to make sure that the structure of this goals, objectives, evaluation criteria, and performance measures is clear. Okay.
Yeah, and I would just, I guess, pose a question, and we could talk about it after the break. But given that trust and transparency was such a big question, and it's something that has emerged in other elements of this project and other projects for ODOT. How do we do that? Are we getting to it? Are we showing with these performance measures and evaluation criteria that we're getting there at the end of the day? After during and after the project construction and into the operation of the project, that we're doing a good job, that we're not going in the opposite direction, but we're actually moving forward. We're building trust.
Thanks, Chris. I think next slide. So we've come to our reflection, which for this particular meeting, we moved a reflection question. So I'd like you to think back to the December workshop on equitable engagement and to the task here at hand today related to performance measures, and spend a few minutes writing in your journal or on just a spare piece of paper on this question. What aspect of process equity is critical, but also difficult to measure? And this is the opposite of low-hanging fruit. What is necessary to include in our work, but it's just really hard to figure out. And I think that trust is one of them. So can you please take 2 minutes to kind of think about that, and then we'll come back together. Okay, we're going to come back together. We have a few minutes. Does anyone have any quick thoughts to share? And this might be something you've had a challenge with in your own work or community. Anything that that came up to you on what aspect of process equity is critical but very difficult to measure? You guys are all outside today, aren't you? Mentally, you're outside. Dwight.
I'll get the conversation started. As I was thinking about the question, I think for me, going back to some of the comments that I heard from my network, I think the health impacts of the individuals, many of them low income, that may be living near or on some of the parallel facilities. And so they will see the likelihood is they will see increased traffic in their neighborhoods or near where they live. And so is there a way of gauging and then quantifying the health impacts of something like that? So, I throw it out there just to the group to kind of get things rolling.
Thank you, Dwight.
You're welcome.
Other reflections? Abe.
Yeah, just to build off of Dwight's comment, that's definitely something that's been rattling around in my head on health impacts and tolling. And so I've been working with our EPI on trying to map some of that out along the corridor, and happy to share that with the committee when the time is right. And I think the performance metric conversation is definitely the time to bring in those potential health metrics. I guess also on process equity and difficult but important things to measure is trying to capture that line between inclusivity and tokenism, and how that's balanced in all of the metrics around trust, which look great at quick glance in the list that you guys have put together, but always kind of a challenging thing to get a hold on.
Thank you very much. Okay. Phil.
Hi. On reflecting on this, I still think that one of the key process equity elements is still based on this concept of trust and transparency. And I keep thinking in my own mind, well, how do you measure whether you've actually engendered trust? And I actually just don't know how you do that, because it's sort of saying, how do you prove that someone loves you? What are the ways that you measure love? That's kind of one of these almost emotionally based concepts that I think it's very hard to even put into qualitative terms. But going back to my own experience in healthcare, it's sort of like if someone doesn't think they've been heard. So in other words, the listening component. If they don't think they've been heard, then they keep at the same point that they're trying to make time and time again. And so I guess in a way, the trust transparency thing is, how do you then feed back to someone that the input that they've provided has been absorbed and somehow has had an influence? Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that everything that they say is actually done or changed, but somehow you've got to be able to indicate that that input resulted in a thought process that may or may not result in something that they actually want or would have preferred. But there's a thought process, and it's that thought process that has to be transparent. You have to say, you know, we heard you, and what you said made us think about these things in such and such a way. And maybe we didn't actually come around to making a change that agrees with you, but here's the reason why. So it's almost like coming full circle. And I think that's, you know, when I was looking at the draft performance measures, you know, a lot of it says, well, we will come back with information, we will report on this, that, or something else. But the underlying element there is, well, sure, you'll come back with information that's in response to, you know, some kind of input. But what's more important is, how did you arrive at the information that you then turned around and fed back to the, you know, to the communities or the stakeholders?
That is a great segue
into
our discussion. So thank you very much. I'm going to move us along. This is the time for our quick 5-minute break. So if you could all come back, it's now, my clock says 4:42. So if we could come back at 4:47, and then we will get into a discussion where I'll be helped by Chris Lepe, and we will be doing a Jamboard. We'll be working with a Jamboard and kind of doing a little brainstorming. So I'll let you all, actually I'll give you till 4:48, since I took a little more time. So if you could come back at 4:48 or in 5 minutes, that would be really great. Thank you. Chris, as folks are coming back in another minute, do you have the PDF of the document that you're going to walk through available?
I do have it.
Okay.
Is that something that you want me to do, like a share
We'll-
screen?
We'll see. Josh, who's been, sharing everything, apparently his PC has crashed. So our double backups are being deployed.
No worries.
But
I was already thinking about, yeah, that's why I had it handy.
Okay, great.
And in terms of the Jamboard, we have somebody that can jam with it.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, it's 4:48 and we'll bring everybody back into the Zoom room. And as we're getting going, Garrett wanted to just bring up one thing before we get going. Garrett.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you to Amanda, because at the last EMAC, she had recommended the framing of we heard and what we're doing about it. And so Dr. Wu, to your point, that's how we tried to set up that first update from the toll program, is to better make that connection for trust building. So we really enjoy kind of just the expertise and learning from you all on that in that tough piece. So just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you. Josh, you are having a little worry party over there at your house. Are you able to have your PC up and running again?
I'm back.
You're back. Okay. Okay. So Chris, is going to orient us to the draft document that was provided to you. Of course, if we were in person, we would have printed this for you and we would be much easier to walk through, but we're going to do it virtually just by putting the PDF on the screen and making sure that you all understand how we put it together. We're then going to have a high-level discussion, and in the interest of time, we're going to avoid the exercise of wordsmithing. We want to get your feedback on it, and we have a series of questions to move you through that. And then we're going to want to work with maybe a couple of you offline to really do that wordsmithing. But we're going to try and see how far we can get today. But keep in mind that we are going to want to do some between meeting work with a couple of you. Chris, are you ready to go?
I'm ready.
Okay. Josh, is there any way you can bring that thing up on screen? Yes. Excellent.
All right. Okay, so so again, based on our discussion from our December meeting, as well as taken from the equity framework and other documents, we drafted two goals for process equity, two overarching kind of engagement goals. And each of these goals has one or two objectives and multiple evaluation criteria. And as I mentioned, typically somewhere in the range of anywhere from 1 to 4 performance measures with an average of about 3. So your charge from the OTC specifically calls for developing performance measures, but we're also looking for your feedback on the draft goals, objectives, and evaluation criteria, because it all works together, right? So on page 1 of the document, you'll see that we have an overview, definitions and reminders, including where all this kind of emerged from in regards to the evaluation criteria, performance measures, and so on and so forth. Page 2 with the blue bar on the left side focuses on understanding and awareness by communities of concern. It's really sort of the provision effectiveness, the effectiveness of the provision of information, if you will. Page 3 and 4 Chris, with, yes?
Kari just had a question. And maybe
Never mind. I just figured out where the document is that I'm trying to find.
Okay, great.
All right. Page 3 and 4 with the green bar focuses on meaningful engagement. How do we show that we're effectively engaging communities beyond just providing information and those measures to indicate that the objective has been met? Page 5 with the purple bar focuses on trust building, which was that major theme that we heard a little bit about today, but also in our December workshop. And then finally, as a little bit of a different kind of angle or element, we have on page 6, there's an orange bar that includes draft goals, objectives, and performance measures that relate to process equity from the I-Tool 5 tool project draft purpose and needs statement. So we wanted to also put that before you so you can see, you know, what we've developed as it relates to those first categories, and you know how it relates to the draft purpose and needs statement, and whether you know you think it's jiving together and whatnot. So we'd like to get your initial feedback to refine the draft, and the project team is taking notes, and we'll share as noted. They're going to be taking notes on a Jamboard, and we're going to be sharing that at various points of the discussion. I didn't want to have it up during the whole discussion so that we can kind of see each other as we're talking to the greatest degree possible. But we will be flashing that up at various points to just kind of make sure that we're circling back with that, with what we're obtaining from y'all. So, but before we get started, I wanted to just kind of check in and see if there's any clarifying questions on the format or how the draft was developed. Okay. So I've got like 5 questions for you here. All right. And as mentioned, we want to try to avoid wordsmithing too much, but we really want to kind of try to get at sort of the heart of the matter. Are we on the right track? What really needs to change? What are the kind of the big picture elements that you want to see incorporated? So the first question is, what about the draft goals, objectives, and evaluation criteria and performance measures were particularly helpful or useful that you thought from a process equity standpoint? What did you think was really meaningful and realistic, for example? Where did we really hit the nail on the head? What do you really like? The second question is, what measures seem to be missing, or are there measures that really aren't needed? Like, what shouldn't be in there? Do we have too many? Are there some that aren't that meaningful and realistic, you know, and we should just get rid of? Are there things that are missing as well? The third question is, how can we best measure progress towards building trust? Again, that major theme that we've heard about, which is a little fuzzy at times, right? And then the fourth is, what additional thoughts do you have to improve the performance measures? And for example, are there any goals, objectives, evaluation criteria, and performance measures that really need to be changed? You know, is the structure of the organization of the document on point? Does it make sense? Have we sufficiently infused the trauma-informed perspective that's in our equity framework? So those are some potential themes to hit on, but you know, that's sort of the catch-all for other types of perspective and input. And finally, for those things that aren't perhaps directly related to process equity, we have a bike rack car park for y'all. So with that, why don't we start with sort of the plus, what you guys liked, what you really want to retain, what's a really great example of the kind of evaluation criteria and performance measures that we should be really going with.
And in the background, we have 2 people who are actually doing the typing. So you guys are all super polite today, but you know, it's okay to just kind of, you know, put some stuff out there. And we have Nick, who's your tech helper, and then Nicole, who's another helper, who are ready to begin typing. So you'll start to see them go. So what is particularly useful? Don't all talk at once.
Did you like anything in the document? Are we generally, you know, do you guys feel like we're generally on the right track? You know, or, you know, is there one particular performance measure that you're like, yes, that's the kind of thing that we need to be focusing on?
James.
Hi, this is James. For me, it kind of goes back to what Phil was saying. And it's hard for me to start talking about the effectiveness of measures when we're not clear about even the collection of the information. And so like how are we going to even try and get a good measure, and like how are we even going to collect the information? Is it just survey, or I don't know what that would mean, and that's what makes it hard for me to say this is a good measure, because if we're not collecting the data right, no matter what the data says, it's not reflective of what's really going on, if that makes sense.
Thank you. Fabian.
Yeah, and apologies, I have my camera off. I'm just dealing with a puppy here. But
we want to see the puppy.
Maybe if he'll let me grab him, I will bring him up here in a second. But I think that what I do like that it does focus on like historically impacted folks. And I think that for me, when we're looking at equity, we really have to think about what brought us to these disparities and really focus on some of the data that we do have historically and make sure that as well as these folding projects, if it is going to affect specific people who live in that neighborhood, to address that as well.
Thank you. Other thoughts that are particularly useful for process equity in the draft document? Philip.
Yeah, I have, maybe it's a little bit of a question and a comment, but I think under the objective of meaningfully engage historically excluded and underserved communities through the project design, development, implementation, blah, 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 then one of the evaluation criteria is ability of historically excluded communities to share their input in culturally preferred ways. One thing I like about the performance measure, though I'm not exactly sure what the measure will actually look like, is the fact that the measures refer to community engagement liaisons and to community-based organizations. So in other words, leveraging those as part of the, I'm not sure if it's the dissemination of information or the gathering of information, or maybe it's both parts. But, for example, community engagement liaisons and EMAC members, I thought that was intriguing. I'm not exactly sure what that looks like. But, community engagement liaisons and EMAC members engage in regular conversations and outreach activities with their communities. Now, I wonder if some of that's sort of what you all were asking us at the very beginning. In other words, what have we heard from our communities, that kind of thing. To me, this particular measure means something a bit more structured. I don't know if that's the intention, but I think that's good.
Right.
And that might be a good one to workshop too,
yeah.
Because if we're pointing the finger back at y'all, in part, right, with this one, in terms of effective engagement, how would you show as EMAC members that you're actually, doing a good job?
Yeah.
In engaging the community? Like, how would we prove that?
Yeah.
And
I guess, to the extent that we're out in the community, it's like, well, who are we? I mean, how do we convey that, we, even as EMAC members, well, what does that mean? And what's the significance of that? And, what kind of a voice do we carry or have that would also indicate to the community that, sure, what they tell us is going to go somewhere, or that it means something.
Yeah, that's good. And so it's partially the EMAC as a conveyor of information in one direction, but also in the opposite direction as well, back towards ODOT, right? And is there something that we can weave in there or into the process that that we can clearly show that you guys are bringing back information. You guys are connectors of perspective and input back to ODOT.
In other words, it's a real legitimate channel.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it might be something like, something to think about, having a space during these meetings to, well, I guess we sort of do, right? A space during these meetings for you guys to provide input back to ODOT on what we just went through that practice actually with, earlier today. So making that a consistent part of these meetings.
Other comments on things that are useful, or are folks ready to move on to the second question?
Let's get one more.
Okay.
Park or Kari, Eduardo, Diana, especially those that haven't spoken up yet. Sharon, we haven't heard from you. All right, so you guys want to dig into the what you don't like. So let's go there. Let's go into the areas of improvement. Actually, my bad. So we're gonna get into the measures that are missing. What's missing, and what do you feel is not needed? Are there sort of superfluous performance measures, things that aren't really all that meaningful? So what do you think really needs to be in there that we didn't include, and what probably doesn't need to be in there?
Park has his hands up.
Yes, my concern is with really titles and things. The pyramid is labeled toll project evaluation, terms and definitions. And going through, there's a number of other things that describe it, kind of the purpose of the program. But this is really focused on the public contact and communication. They aren't the goals of the project. Reducing single occupant vehicles, reducing traffic congestion, that sort of thing. So the topics, the titles confused me a little bit. I started looking for broader evaluation criteria, and this is really more focused on public interaction.
Yes, and Park, that's going to be the next part of the conversation, actually, that you guys are going to start to dive into a little bit today. Garrett's going to talk to you about outcome equity, and then you're going to have a presentation from Portland Metro about what kind of outcome equity kind of measures they're looking at. And at the next EMAC meeting, that'll be where, especially where you as members get to dive into what you're effectively describing there, which are more of the project, benefits and impacts, the on the ground benefits that communities will hopefully see as part of this project, whether it be affordability or access to opportunity, transportation choices, and so on and so forth. But the reason why the process equity, the process piece is important is it's a kind of a critical component of making sure that we are reaching equitable outcomes as part of this process, that we are doing an effective job in community engagement and the public input. So that's why we're kind of, we're focusing on this first, and then we're going to get into the outcome equity next, if that makes sense. Does that answer your question, Park? Yeah. Okay.
Diana.
Hi there. Good afternoon. So it's just, I don't know. Maybe I'm tired. I don't know. Maybe somebody can help explain this to me. But in that first frame, first slide where we have that pyramid, I'm really challenging this pyramid, this visual. It reminds me of the hierarchical structure. And if we're talking about equity, that pyramid does not represent equity in terms of a visual. If we're talking, and I understand that goals and objectives are at the top, but it's and I'm going to say this, and it's probably not the right space to say this, but I have to say this. It's in these conversations I'm having with other committees around other committees that I'm involved in, that we are advancing racial equity and social justice issues. And it's not only in the words that we use, in the actions, in terms of how we are mitigating through these challenges and then working with community to address the racial inequities and social justices in our community, but it's also the visuals that we use as we're communicating in community. And so that pyramid for me, I'm just having a really hard time embracing that visual image of that pyramid, and maybe thinking differently in terms of what would that visual look like that would be more reflective in the work that we're doing around to address equity here in this framework. It comes back to what I want to say is that I really appreciate wholeheartedly the land acknowledgement and the recognition of our indigenous people in Oregon. But it feels kind of always, it feels very disingenuous when we do a land acknowledgement and yet continue to practice dominant culture ways of doing business. And I understand that, because this is a state agency, there's certain protocols and procedures and the way things have to be done. But I think that we probably need to also revisit this land acknowledgement at the beginning and how we move about doing our practice of business on these calls and the overall objectives of what we're trying to achieve here.
Thank you, Diana, for that comment and that thought. I must admit, when I saw the pyramid, I was thinking the same thing, but I wasn't sure if it was just me. So thanks for pointing that out. I wonder if a more of a circular graphic would be better. I guess I ask you the question, Diana, or others on the committee, what kind of visual representation might be less hierarchical looking?
I mean, certainly a circular visual would probably be better. I don't want to speak for the group. That's just my perception, and I certainly welcome other folks' thought in terms of changing that visual, that graphic.
Great, thank you. Other thoughts? Yep, Sharon.
Yeah, I'm just following up on the concept of how we portray things. I think is really important, and because it changes how you view things and how your mindset works. And I like the idea of having it be more circle centered, because we all, our goals and objectives are at the center of the work that we're doing. So maybe it's a concentric circle idea. That just comes to mind immediately. And I think it's a really good perspective, a lens that we all need to try and shift our thinking through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that. So you start with the goals and objectives, move out to evaluation criteria, and then you got the performance measures at the exterior, something like that.
Kind of a wheel and kind of a encircling of our goals.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Bill has another comment.
Yeah, I was just going to say, in terms of circles versus triangles versus linear versus whatever, it's almost like you could have on an outer circle goals and objectives, and the next circle being evaluation criteria, the next most inner circle performance measures, and at the very heart, outcomes.
I like it. And I will say, it sounds like there's some interest in reworking this graphic. If any of you would like to work with staff in reworking that, I think that would be very much welcome in providing input on that. I think we can do that, yeah? I don't want to speak for the team, but.
No, it's great.
Okay.
I'm wondering if we could move along to the next one, just in the interest of making sure we have enough time for the Metro presentation.
Yeah, absolutely. The next question, which I actually trying to pull back here. Apologies. We have another. Okay, so how can we best measure progress towards building trust? And I think we had a little bit of commentary on, about that already earlier. And I think what I recall hearing partially was like what we include, but also Phil, I think you said something to the effect of what did we not include and why. And I think that's also important, right? It's not just saying yes, but it's when we have to say no, being clear about that no and communicating that, and then giving the explanation as to why that is the case, and being transparent about the parameters of the project and what we can and cannot do.
Yeah, I think the transparency piece is, if you have to say no, what is it that resulted in the no that takes into account the input? Because then at least you're still signaling that everyone was heard and the information was processed, even if the result isn't necessarily agreeable.
Great.
Yep.
Thank you. Other
As
thoughts?
we know, with family, we don't always agree, but hopefully we trust. So other thoughts in terms of building trust and transparency. How do we do it? How do we show it? How do we prove it?
This was the big one. And how do we measure it? Diana, do you have a thought, or is your hand just still up? And
no, I wanted to.
Yes.
Yeah,
please.
I wanted to say something. So, how do we build trust? We want to. It makes it sound like we're trying to put it in a box, and trust cannot be placed in a box, and trust cannot be. We cannot set a deadline, a timeline on trust. This kind of work takes. It takes a great deal of invested time to build trust in communities. And unfortunately, this project, we have some hard deadlines. And that's a challenge. And so I'm a pretty optimistic person, but also in that sense, very realistic. And let's be real here. We're trying to put trust in a box, and trust does not belong in a box. And if we could figure how to do that out, I think we'd be all millionaires on this call.
That's what we're trying to do. We're all trying to do
right. So it's challenging, and I don't think that. I mean, we may be able to find some medium ground somewhere, but I really want us to be conscientious and cautious while we're moving down this conversation of how do we build trust in such a short period of time.
All right, so I captured two themes, Diana, from what you noted. One is humility, right? Because we're talking about something that has brewed for a very long time, and we're talking about one project here that has, as you mentioned, some parameters as far as the time factor. You also make me think though about the sort of here today, gone tomorrow effect that often happens with agencies and projects. And so, sure, we build trust as part of this project over a course of a few months. But what is the longer term commitment? What is the longer term relationship that is established so that it's not just, we're doing a good job here and we're engaging folks and then, we're gone for 10 years or something like that, right? So, part of building trust is that long-term investment is that sort of stability in terms of being there and nurturing those relationships. Sharon?
Yeah, I think one of the real challenges we have in this limited time frame is I find it's very hard to build trust when we're looking at each other on a screen in a box. And I don't have an answer for that. I just know in a lot of the prior, more challenging infrastructure projects in a local setting, the best way that we built trust was meeting and talking and getting to know each other. And I just don't know how we can accomplish that same feeling in a virtual setting.
Yeah.
Or maybe it is, maybe we need to figure out how do we invite our communities to maybe have more participation in these meetings. And it just is really, it's hard if you can't sit down, go to somebody where they are, meet them where they are to build that trust. Instead we're saying, come to us, look at us on this box. And I don't have an answer. I just have a concern.
So true. So true.
I'm going to do a time check. I see Park and Philip have their hands raised, which is fantastic about answering this question. And then just, if we could get their comments included and then get a couple more. I know we haven't gotten through all our questions though. So,
and I would say that that's okay because, I think we're starting a conversation here. We have other vehicles for input. So for all of you that aren't able to fully share your thoughts, please do share them after the meeting, especially while they're still fresh in your head. But yeah, let's take a few more questions. Speaking of time, Diana, we're limited in time here.
Park, I think you had yours up first, maybe.
Thank you. I think maybe presenting some material as pros and cons, as opposed to there's a straight line and we're going to do X, Y, Z, and it's going to result in this, might be helpful. It's disheartening to me that the comments by the public are so quickly, I want no tolls. I don't want anything to do with it. I don't want the government taking the money. And I'd rather hear, this is a tough choice and there's some benefits to doing this, but my opinion is whatever it is. So that there's really a weighing of pros and cons, which I think we're going to end up with in the end anyway. Thank you.
Thank you, Park. Philip?
Yeah, just as a final comment, and maybe this is a devil's advocate kind of suggestion, but perhaps it would be a little less, maybe it would be a little bit more humble and a little less arrogant to not even have trust as a specific goal or objective. Just like saying, our goal is we're going to create love. Well, you don't do that, but maybe focusing on transparency is the vehicle that will over time ultimately result in trust. But we can certainly set transparency as an objective, and we hope for the best as an outcome.
What do people think of that?
I really like that. This is Diana.
Okay, thank you, Diana.
I like that as well. This is Jermaine.
Thanks, Jermaine.
I like transparency as well. And when Park was talking, you know, I think something that came to my mind was sort of this idea of putting all the cards on the table or putting all your costs on the table and understanding like our costs in health and in time, and having that be transparent. And you know, I read the public comments as well, and there's a lot of comments about we don't want tolls, and I think that oftentimes, you know, we zoom into like, you know, what that price signal might be, and so I think being transparent in that, like, you know, as ODOT, you're managing a full system for lots of people, and I think that's sometimes where the struggle is, where transparency would help, and just recognizing all of the costs of the current status quo, and I guess putting that in perspective. And I you know, I'm looking at the document, and there you know, are components in there about, like, you know, sharing the vision and the rationale behind it. And so I think just turning up that dial on transparency in our current status quo helps to kind of bring a little more light into that space.
Thank you, Michael.
Excellent comment. Excellent, excellent perspective, all of you. Thank you. And I'm assuming that we're out of time.
We are a little bit out of time, but if Garrett, who's up next, and you, who are also up next, can shrink it up, I think we'll be able to get back on time. It's totally fine. Because I would like to share our Jamboard, to reflect and be transparent that we have heard you. And also we have somewhat of an ulterior motive here, is we would love to be able to use a Jamboard, have all of you be jamming on the board, but we thought we'd best show what it can look like before we attempt to train you on it. So this is a series of questions that you saw as we were going through. So you started out warm and got warmer as you went. So you can see the different I have it up on my screen too. So what about the document do you like? The focus on impacted communities, leveraging the liaisons, and were two of the main things that were coming out. We had a couple of feedback to improve things on, focusing on collection of information first, and weave into the process proof that ODOT is considering input. The next one there, Josh. See, we have a few more comments here on measures seem to be missing. So we got a few things in here, and this is where we talked about the circular graphic that people seem to be a little more, they have a little more affinity toward, and also being clear on the titles, and you know that this is really focused on the process and not as much on the outcomes. I also wrote in here a comment that came earlier, ensure the process is inclusive and meaningful, and we're not tending toward tokenism. And the next one, I believe, is the trust one. So we had a lot of comments on that. And I guess the thing that really resonated with me and with a few others of you is this notion of transparency, and perhaps that should be the goal or the objective rather than trust, because trust is pretty lofty and does happen over time. And this is just one project. So that really resonated with me. So that would be something that the project team takes back. Then I don't know that we got to, there was one more question, but of course we can share these questions with you and we still want answers to them. What's the next one? Oh, additional thoughts? We had a couple people typing, so that visual, switching from a pyramid to some type of circle and presenting the pros and cons, and it's more of a trade-off, is what I was hearing. And I think there might have been one in the bike rack parking lot, car park, revisiting the land acknowledgement and making sure we're focusing on objectives and what we're trying to achieve. Thank you very much for working through our Jamboard and giving your feedback. It's very, very useful. I am going to turn it to Chris to sort of walk us through, and he's mentioned a little bit about how we're turning from process equity to outcome equity. And Garrett are going to walk through that just a little bit. So Josh, if you can bring up the presentation again. And just on a time check, we need to be done with this portion to have Elizabeth come up at 5:30. So if you can run through this really quickly, because I do not want to shrink Elizabeth's time for Metro.
All right. That sounds good. So before I move forward though, Anne, I think we are requesting volunteers, yes?
Yes.
To kind of, so how is that going to happen? Are we looking for raised hands after the fact?
If people want to let us know today, that would be great. Also, you can just send an email, in the future as well. And we will be reaching out afterwards to just remind you of some of our requests.
Great. Yes. So we need your help. So please help us improve those process outcomes, performance measures, and evaluation criteria. Thank you. So moving on to outcome equity. So we already talked a little bit about it. We've been focused on the engagement piece, but then now what are the outcomes that we're seeking? And so if we look at the equity framework and what we defined as outcome equity, it states that outcome equity means that the toll projects will acknowledge existing inequities and will strive to prevent historically excluded and underserved communities from bearing the burden of negative effects that directly or indirectly result from the toll projects, and will further seek to improve overall transportation affordability, access to opportunity, and community health. That's a mouthful, but basically the idea is kind of assess and acknowledge the inequities, right? Share those out, make sure that we're avoiding additional harm, and then very importantly, what this project is trying to do, we're not just trying to say, we're going to just harm you a little bit here. No, we are trying to advance equity. We're trying to improve transportation affordability, access to opportunity, and community health. So Garrett's gonna take it from here and talk a little bit about how we're starting to kind of get those wheels turning. And then as mentioned, he's gonna pass it on to our guest speaker for today, Elizabeth from Portland Metro.
Actually, can you go back a slide? So that very end of that last sentence, the transportation affordability, that dovetails really well with the Oregon Transportation Commission's directive for low income and environmental justice. Accessible opportunity we're going to combine that with the transit and multimodal work, and community health and the neighborhood safety piece. So those are kind of our three buckets of content that we're going to work through. Can you go to the next slide? And so provided to you is kind of a draft of what the document that exists today for 205, but we're in the process of updating that based on a lot of the community feedback. And then we're going to loop back in and bring that to you all. Because again, in these kind of larger, more systemic processes, what gets measured gets done. And so we want to make sure we're measuring the right pieces. Next slide. And so I've talked about this already, so I won't go back over it, but this is really where I think we're going to get our game plan together. We'll bring some ideas to you all next time, but I'm really looking forward to getting into some of the nitty-gritty details on this at our next meeting. Next slide. So I'm going to hand it over now to Elizabeth Morass-O'Hara, and Metro is ahead of us a bit in this game, which will be very helpful on the outcome measures for equity. And so they'll do a presentation. They're kind of looking for feedback, and be sure to keep a bit what they've done in their mind as we dive into this in our next presentation.
Thanks. Elizabeth.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Oh,
Welcome.
thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here today, and I wanted to thank EMAC for, I'm grateful for the opportunity really to provide you an overview on what Metro is up to. Sorry, my phone's going off. And also to get your feedback, because I want to hear from equity experts and kind of get your feeling of how we are moving forward with our study. So we only have 20 minutes tonight, 25 maybe. So I'm going to go kind of fast, and I think that we could hold the discussion towards the end. It'll be more positive. So next slide, please. That's kind of 1.5 slides. It's kind of funky. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to give an overview of what our scope and our intended outcomes are. And then I want to, let's see, I want to talk about the pricing projects and our equity considerations when we think about pricing, and then how we're measuring impacts as part of the regional congestion pricing study, and then get your feedback. Metro is conducting a technical study on congestion pricing tools in partnership with the City of Portland and TriMet, and really actually in close coordination with ODOT, since ODOT's moving forward with some tolling projects. And we want to assess the bigger picture. We're looking at the wider perspective. We want kind of a technical analysis that will help answer the big questions around what are the most effective pricing tools, what are the effects of different types of pricing tools, and how the tools perform in our region with our land use and our transportation system, because they affect how things will perform. Next slide, please. So we presented to the Committee on Racial Equity at Metro, and they said it was really helpful to have questions early in the presentation so that people can be thinking about it as we walk through. So I'm giving you all the same benefit. I'm hoping it's helpful, but just to have you thinking about what kinds of things you think can help us understand how to indicate equity, whether it's being positively or negatively impacted by a transportation project, how we are using data, and what else we might want to consider when we're putting together our equity measures, because we're not done with this study, but we're working through what we know we can measure and thinking about what kind of findings that we need to have to share with people in the future if they're moving forward with a project, so that they can be thinking about equity holistically. All right, next. All right, so as I said, congestion pricing is for Metro has been recognized in our regional plans for like 10 years. And it came to a head in 2018, where the regional transportation plan prioritized that staff go out and do a near-term comprehensive review of congestion pricing, so that we could pair the $15 billion in investments in infrastructure with thinking about how do we reduce travel demand. We can't just build our way out of congestion. We need to think about how to use things, our infrastructure more efficiently. And because it came out of the regional transportation plan that had more than 2 years of extensive outreach and kind of process equity, I guess is what I would say, lots of input. And we were told to go do the technical study. We are not doing a huge major outreach component, but we are reaching out to get targeted feedback. And we are getting targeted feedback from what we consider to be experts in equity, which we would include the EMAC committee. And we are asking you to take a look at our technical work and see if we have blind spots, and let us know what you think about how we are measuring equity with the different pricing tools. Next slide. So our project is really, well, I should start by saying Metro's perspective on congestion pricing is, when we use that term, we're saying that we're thinking about using a pricing mechanism such as tolls or parking charges or some other way to alert drivers to the total cost of their trip. And our roads are kind of the only utility that we don't do that. We hide the cost. And so people overuse, they don't think about the cost of their trip on others. And where it's been used, it's been really effective as a tool to change behavior, reduce congestion, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, as well as other emissions. So our charge is to do a technical feasibility study, and we're looking at the feasibility and performance of 4 different types of pricing. So we're looking at cordons, or a cordon area where you draw a boundary around a congested part of a city. We're looking at downtown Portland, and a second alternative that has a little bit of the east side. And vehicles would pay to enter that area or drive around in that area. We're also looking at vehicle miles traveled, or a road user charge. And that's where people pay for every mile they drive. We're looking at roadway corridor is what it's also called. It's a direct charge to use a specific roadway. That's more like what ODOT's looking at. And then parking, charges to park in specific areas that goes up or down depending on the time of day. Next slide. And we're measuring all of these against the regional transportation plans top 4 priorities. And these have been adopted by our region as what we care about. And when we look at our RTP, we say we want to make sure that we are managing congestion, that we're working towards our climate goals, that we're looking at safety, and that we're looking at equity. And we need to address racial disparities as part of that. Next slide. So our overall goal is to understand how the region can use congestion pricing to manage traffic demand to meet climate goals without adversely impacting and potentially improving safety and equity. What we are not going to do is recommend projects. We're here to educate and inform. We want the policymakers to hear what can work from a really much more technical perspective, but make sure that we have kind of the breadth of understanding that we can be helpful when people are proposing projects. So we'll provide a baseline understanding. That's our goal, based on how these can work in our region, and then answer those questions. We also, so we think that these strategies can help inform the work that ODOT is doing and the work that the City of Portland is doing, and all future efforts. And we'll also identify areas that we know we didn't get deep enough into and they probably need further study. Next slide. So how do we measure equity impacts? It's really important that we do this in a way that makes sense. So we want to review the current state of equity. We know our current system is not equitable and it has uneven outcomes, and it charges some people more, and it favors spending on automobile infrastructure. We want to compare the performance of different pricing strategies to existing conditions and to other pricing strategies, so we can see which ones seem to be working better, what are some concerns, what are some areas that we want to focus on, and then identify issues of concerns and whether and how they could be addressed. So I'll go into that in a little bit. Next slide. So one of the ways that you can address concerns is how you develop your pricing program. You can build some things into a program that automatically help make it more equitable. And the same type of project, you know, the same, we're going to charge X toll on X road, can be a much more equitable project if you build affordability into that. You could have discounts for key groups, more flexible. It's actually, pricing projects can be more flexible than the gas tax, which we know is regressive. So there can be ways that you can get at equity by providing discounts and exemptions for key groups. You can focus the revenue in areas where there are deficits, like where they need more transit, they need better sidewalks, key neighborhoods. Investing in senior and disabled services is hugely helpful. And then you can also target the pricing benefits to key locations. Like you can look at an area and say, this is a low income area that could really benefit from better transportation access. So maybe your pricing program makes sure that autos and buses move better there. Next slide. So there are, evaluating the equity of pricing is kind of a multi-process thing. You can look at the program design, but we're also moving beyond that. We'll be documenting kind of the best practices. We're going to test these 4 different pricing strategies, and we're in the middle of that to understand what kind of impact they have on our region. And we're going to try to get a better sense of, if we applied the transportation modeling and census data and geographic analysis, what happens in key areas, what happens for areas that have limited transportation options now, and how it affects different groups. And I want to start with a disclaimer. We're going to rely a lot on our models, and we're also going to rely a lot on census data and geographic analysis to try and demonstrate how things operate. And they're all kind of a snapshot in time, and they're not perfect. And there's that quote about modeling that everybody uses, that all models are wrong, but some are useful. And so we're going to just be upfront about that. We think they're useful. Next slide. So these are the 4 RTP priorities and different ways we think we can measure them. The ones that I want to focus on with you today are the equity measures and accessibility. And so these are mostly derived from our regional transportation model, and we also have some other tools that we're looking at. Next slide. So we're focusing in on access to jobs because we can measure that, and also because it's been shown to be an important indicator of people's ability to get out of poverty. There was a Harvard study that indicated that it is a strong indicator of how people can move up. And access to jobs is a major focus for that reason. We're looking at how many, or when you look at a area, how many jobs people can access in 45 minutes by transit and 30 minutes by a car. And so we're going to see if that goes up or down. And we're also going to look at specific areas that you might be concerned about. So do the benefits and impacts affect everybody the same, or can they be focused in areas that we already know are marginalized? So next slide. So this is a map of Metro has mapped equity focus areas, and they show concentrations of communities of color, English language learners, and lower income communities. And so that would be a group that we would be looking at when we map. Did travel times go up for these people? Did costs go up for these people? Are there more congestions in these areas? And so that's one of the tools we're looking at, is how do costs and travel times change for these areas versus the general region? And then also we're looking at with this keen eye to areas that have few alternatives to driving, don't have good transit access, what happens in those areas? And then what happens for TAZs, areas that have fewer access to automobiles? It's all a snapshot in time, but it's a good indicator of how the benefits are provided throughout the region. So that's what we're looking at. Next slide.
Elizabeth, I just wanted to do a time check. We have about 5 more minutes before we, 5 to 7 more minutes.
Okay, well, good, because we're on the questions now.
Perfect.
So I'm going to make you work. I'm open to any questions you have for me, but I'm really excited to hear if you can think of other ways that we can measure equity. And we're going to take this information back. I don't want to stop people if they're having a really good conversation, but we're going to take this information back and we're going to compile it, and we will have some findings that include what we heard from you. So should I read the questions or should I just open it up?
I think you can just open it up.
Right.
Just reactions or comments to Elizabeth's presentation. And I think the key one she mentioned is, what else can you add to our equity measures and considerations for this study?
And it was really wonky. Sorry about that.
So maybe we should start with, questions versus reactions.
Yeah.
Clarify questions. Kari has a question.
Went fast.
I actually had a clarifying question on where you were talking about the first measurement and accessibility, and I noticed that it specifically called out active transportation, but I didn't see transit there, and I'm wondering if your definition of active transportation includes transit.
Yes, so accessibility, is that what you were talking about? The equity measure?
Yep.
This is actually focused on transit and autos primarily, but we also have so let me step back. There are 3 performance measures in that box. One of them is access to jobs, and we are measuring that by transit and auto to see if it goes up or down by areas. Access to community places, we're not as focused on that, but we do have that data if people think that's important, and that includes things like hospitals and schools and important things like that. We are also looking, once we're done with this, looking at the completeness of the active transportation network, and we do mean transit and is it impossible to cross the street to get to something? All that.
That's great, thank you.
Yeah.
Any other clarifying questions or comments for Elizabeth just about what you've heard and how to improve it?
I think Abe has a hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry. Abe.
No worries. Yeah, I guess a quick question and a quick comment is when you say the region, is that the UGB at large or beyond, outside of the UGB into the surrounding counties and north into Washington?
That's a good question. So as Metro, our jurisdiction is really the UGB. However, we have done some scenario modeling that takes into account the area north of the river because it's kind of important to understand that. So we have some data for both, but our main focus is the urban growth boundary area.
Okay, it'd be interesting to see if there's any significant differences between the different pricing models and outside of the UGB down into Washington County and Clackamas County as well. I'm curious too if you guys have looked at any health impacts associated with the different pricing models, whether it's asthma or heart attack or.
It's a really good question. We do know that emissions really affect people's health and that people near congested areas tend to be lower income, people of color, and other marginalized groups that are more affected by emissions. Our look at this point, and I think this is something that we might be recommending that any project that goes forward digs much deeper into this, is we're looking at emissions as kind of a function of vehicle miles traveled. And it's going to be more like, does it reduce or, how well does it do at reducing the amount of emissions? I don't know if it's going to be as targeted as we would want for a project.
Kari? Oh, sorry. Did you have another follow-up, Abe?
Nope. No, that was it.
Kari, did you have another comment or question?
I didn't, but I will.
Okay.
And this might actually be less a question for you, Elizabeth, and more for the sort of coordination and collaboration between your work and the ODOT team. I'm really intrigued by your comment about the different pricing tools and their effectiveness as a tool to change behavior, and thinking about what we saw earlier around this, sort of map and this list of projects that is being more or less paid for by the tolling revenue, which is by and large, there's a few, we had a discussion around, potential mitigation to offset the impact of tolling, but the projects themselves are not aimed at changing behavior. And so I guess my question is, what's the interaction between the Metro study and how that might impact anything that's happening with this tolling project on 205, which you referenced in your presentation?
That is a great question. So we do have, we have been trying to coordinate closely with ODOT and the City of Portland because they're both looking at different types of pricing. And we're parallel, but not guiding each other so much. as sharing information, I guess. We're hoping that our findings will help, you know, all the different projects moving forward to think holistically about how pricing can work better or not. And we're not just measuring the equity piece, but we are measuring what we can out of equity. So I would say that often this is kind of a strange Metro project, as we're just like trying to be really technical at this point. But I am confident that the findings that we have will be reacted to by our political people and our policy people. And I'm sure that they're going to inform discussions between the different projects. Is that a good answer?
Thank you. Any other comments or questions for Elizabeth? And then we're going to move on to sort of a wrap up of this particular meeting. Amanda.
Yeah, I'm wondering, are these slides somewhere? Because I wanted to look at something that you showed a few minutes ago, but I feel like I need to read some of this a little more, think about it a little more before I could provide some input to the questions.
Yeah, I can appreciate that. This was pretty fast, and you guys got the condensed version of 2 meetings that I had with CORE. So I just assumed you're a lot, quick reads, but I think that the slideshow has been sent to you, and if not, we can make sure it is. And you're also more than welcome, and I would appreciate actually if you want to send me any questions afterwards or thoughts.
And Amanda, we can make sure that you get that direct link. It was put online, but we'll send it to you again. And there was also a fact sheet that kind of went through it as well.
Okay, I was looking in the emails and I couldn't find it. But
we will make sure that it goes very clear.
Okay.
There was a lot of links. So. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Elizabeth, for educating this group about other things that are happening. This is a big conversation there, and people can look at it different ways. And this is a nice intro into what we're going to be talking about next time.
Great. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So we're moving on to next steps. I want to make sure that you are able to give us feedback on just how we're running these meetings. So we're sending a link to you. And so you should have an email from Nick Fazio, who you probably got your other link from. And that it's just a monkey survey with some evaluation questions. And we'll be starting to do this as we go, just as part of our effort of process equity. And we would ask that you do this right away before you move on to dinner, that while the meeting is really fresh in your mind. Our next meeting is March 31st. We'll be reaching out to you before then to have some discussions on that, to refine those process equity performance measures, and then also circle back around with you on the public involvement plan. Before I move, I'm going to, I guess, a reminder that to reach out if you have specific questions. We'll be reaching out to you, and so in between, I'm going to turn it to Hannah for any closing comments. Before I do that, just sort of giving you time to kind of check your email too for that link. I want to see if there's any other comments or questions just about everything we talked about today. We went through a series of things and just giving the toll program update, and then working on the performance measures, and then hearing the Metro presentation. It's almost like we had 3 different meetings in one meeting. Kari.
Hi, sorry, I feel like I'm talking a lot today. I know we didn't have this on our agenda, and I heard somebody mention it earlier, but I'm hopeful that we could get some additional information about the legislation that was mentioned, because I think that is very relevant to our work, and it would be helpful, I think, to the committee to have an understanding of what that means, both, essentially for the work that we're doing here.
We can do that. Thank you. other sort of reflection questions from today from the committee? Especially if there were folks who were quiet and absorbing everything and wanted to share something at the end. Hannah, I'm going to turn to you and just do some last minute reflections or and close out.
Thanks so much, Anne, for a great meeting. And thank you everyone for your input. We have a lot of work to do with, looking at the process equity performance measures and need your help. So if anyone is really enthusiastic about being in a little subgroup, please email us and we can get that going. And we're going to work really hard to work with you to kind of keep that moving, like Anne said, in between meetings, along with getting you the PI plan so that we can do all the fun and exciting stuff that Garrett kind of previewed for what's coming, so we can really get into outcome equity, Park. All right, well, thank you. Have a nice evening.
Thank you. So don't forget to fill out your survey, please. It's very helpful to us. Have a good evening, all.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Have a good night.